Hey, when are you coming back? It's already been 8 months, so get your ass back here.
My ex-husband, who suddenly came to my parents' house, says such things to me with the same irrationality as ever. What is he saying now, after ignoring me for so long? I looked at my husband with cold eyes and said, "We are strangers to each other now. I'm married to someone else to begin with. My name is Daisy. I'm a 35-year-old office worker. My husband Jake and I have been married for 2 years. I met him at a blind date thrown by a friend. She was worried that I was working so much that I would never meet anyone, so she arranged for me to meet someone. Jake was at the party and we quickly became friends. I think it was good that he was proactive in talking to me. I'm not very good at romance, so I prefer someone who leads me. And Jake was 2 years younger than me and close in age, so we had a lot in common. We soon exchanged contact information and started dating. And after about a year of dating, he proposed to me and we got married. I was very happy that I was going to marry the man I loved. However, there are many things you don't know until you get married. First of all, he was a man who did no housework at all. He hardly ever did laundry or cleaned the house. Jake had lived at home all his life, but I thought he was still an adult and would at least have a chance to do the chores himself. Since he had no experience in housework, he had never cooked, and the last time he held a knife was in home economics class when he was in junior high school. Hearing this story made my head hurt. It meant that my husband was trying to let me do all the household chores because he was not able to do them himself. And so began my difficult days. I had to get up early every morning to make lunch boxes for the two of us and prepare breakfast for both of us. Then, when I came home from work, I hurried to prepare dinner. It is really hard work because I have to cook even when I am exhausted from work. I would like my husband to do other chores except the cooking. Can you do the cleaning and laundry? But he says,
I've never done it before, so I can't do it.
He doesn't even try. As if I were teaching a child, I told him, I'll show you how to do it, and we'll do it together. But, unlike a child, he is not so honest.
No, it's okay.
At first, I thought it was inevitable, but when I am busy with work, it is hard for me to take care of the housework. I was so exhausted, but one day Jake asked,
Have you been slacking off on the housework lately? I feel like the house is dusty, and the clothes I want to wear aren't washed. When I was at home, this never happened to me.
I was really upset when he said that to me. Then you should do the housework too. Your mother was a housewife, right? I work as an office worker, so I think it's obvious that I don't have much time to spend on housework. When I raised my voice, my husband also got angry with his eyes wide open.
What are you talking about, you spoiled brat? My mom was doing a decent job of housework, while also taking care of me and my brother. It must be easier for you without kids.
No, but...
Anyway, do your chores properly.
Why should I be told such a thing? I'm trying so hard to do my best. I've been making lunches and dinners with proper nutrition and balance in mind. Then let me cut corners on the cooking. I've decided to reduce the number of dishes little by little to lessen the burden on myself. I cheated by making the lunch boxes with more bread, and I started using frozen foods a lot. For dinner, I made more bowls of rice and made it simple. This made housework a little easier. I wiped the floors lightly in the morning and cleaned it all at once on weekends. In laundry, except for fashionable clothes, I run the dryer in the morning and put it together when I get home. My husband seemed to be satisfied with the cleanliness of the room for the time being and didn't say anything. And he never noticed if I'm cutting corners with lunch or dinner. If this is the case, I should have skipped out on things like this earlier. I could lessen the burden on my house chores, so I could focus on my work that way. For the time being, our life as a couple was fine, and we have been living together for 2 years. However, just recently, my husband started to complain again. It all started when I was packing up the plastic trash.
What's that?
What? My husband took the garbage bag from me and began to take out the contents. Wait, what are you doing?
Did you use this much of frozen food?
My husband said, pointing at the empty bags of frozen food.
I told you not to skip work, didn't I? What does this mean? If you're a wife, you should be making homemade food and serving it to your husband.
I was also angry at my unreasonable husband. I do all the housework, so you should at least let me reduce my burden like that. If you have a problem with me, I told you, you should do the chores too. I mean, it's been almost a year since I started using frozen foods, and you didn't notice any difference at all, which means your tongue was satisfied with frozen foods, right? You don't even know the difference in taste, so don't you dare talk like that. When I said this, my husband seemed to have lost his patience and choked on his words. He didn't think I had been using frozen foods for such a long time.
Shut up! I didn't think you were such a bad wife. Don't ever use frozen foods again.
My husband yelled at me and went to his office. He is really unreasonable. Or maybe he just doesn't feel comfortable unless he's the one telling them off. After 2 years of marriage, I realized that my husband was a guy full of useless pride. I was angry at myself for not realizing that when we were dating. Then, I decided to skip housework without hesitation. I would not be outdone by my husband. Then I started bringing my own lunchbox that I had made the night before and giving my husband $5.
What the hell?
I'm fed up with you complaining too much. So from now on, please just take that for lunch.
Isn't it your duty as a wife to make a lunchbox?
There is no such obligation.
Don't be silly. I told you I won't allow you to neglect the housework, didn't I?
I don't care if you allow it or not, and if you don't like it, I won't give you that $5. When I said that without taking a step back, my husband looked frustrated and took the $5 from the table and put it in his wallet.
Make it $10 at least.
It was a little amusing to hear my husband say it that way, so the next day I decided to give him $10 out of our household budget. I was quite grateful to no longer have the burden of making lunch. After that, we had occasional fights like that, but I managed to continue my married life with my husband. Some may wonder why I am still married to such a person, but I don't want to go through with divorce so easily. It is easy to break up, but I don't think it's right to say goodbye to someone you love and got married to just because you don't have the same values. We are both human beings, and no couple is perfectly matched. I think it is important to gradually adjust and tolerate each other's values in this way. With this in mind, I continue to live my married life with my husband. One day, however, my husband took an action that destroyed my thinking. It was out of the blue. "Welcome home," I greeted my husband, who always comes home a little later than I do. But there was no reply from my husband. I wondered if he didn't hear me. I thought it was okay and focused on cooking dinner. My husband changed from his suit into his house clothes and came into the living room and started watching TV while lying on the sofa. I was ready for dinner, so I put the dishes on the table and called him. "Dinner is ready." But my husband took his seat at the table without saying a word. and he started eating his food without saying anything. I felt bad, but I thought he might be in a bad mood because of something bad that happened at work, so I let it go. I knew that if I complained about my husband's attitude, it would only lead to a fight. However, my husband finished his meal and left the table without saying anything. As you can imagine, this made me angry. Can't you at least say thanks for dinner? And take away the dishes when you're done eating? I said to my husband, but he just walked into his room with a blank expression on his face. What in the world is going on? I muttered to myself in the living room. Then I took the dishes off the table and washed the dishes for the two of us. We hadn't been fighting recently, and I hadn't said anything to upset him. So I assumed it was something other than a domestic matter. However, when I said good morning the next morning, he ignored me. And when I said welcome home to my husband when he came home from work, he ignored me. Even when I tried to talk to him during dinner, he ignored me. This kept happening for a few days, and I became very angry. Why have you been ignoring me for so long? If there's something you're upset with me about, you should tell me. You need to have a proper conversation with me. I raised my voice like that. But my husband was in a cold mood and would not make eye contact with me. And eventually he went to his room without talking to me. He continued to ignore me for a week. I was getting tired of it and stopped talking to him. He never spoke to me, and I realized that we had not spoken to each other for about 2 weeks. I didn't know what he was upset about, and I was so fed up with him ignoring me like this that I began to think it was a hassle to cook dinner for him. Then one day, I decided not to cook dinner. When my husband came home from work, he looked at the dining table and saw that there was no dinner. He glanced at me. But he didn't speak to me, just got dressed and went out. What in the world is this? If this situation continues forever, it will be difficult to stay married. While I was thinking about this, I found the divorce papers in our drawer. To my surprise, the divorce papers were already signed by my husband. I thought to myself, so my husband is already thinking about getting divorced. At that moment, something snapped inside me. If my husband was so inclined, I should just submit the papers. I immediately signed my part of the papers and submitted them. Then I packed up my stuff and went back to my parents' house. My parents were surprised that I had a large package, but they heard what happened and were indignant. I then commuted to work from my parents' house. I never heard from my ex-husband. A week went by, and I still hadn't heard from him. So I figured that he no longer needs me. Part of me was a little sad, but a large part of me was angry. I'm going to forget about that guy. With that thought, I switched over and went about my daily life. Then, about 8 months after I left my ex-husband, he suddenly came to my house. At that time, I thought it was a delivery service or something, and opened the front door as usual. Then, I saw my ex-husband there. Huh? Why? When my ex-husband saw that it was me who opened the door, his eyes widened, and he got angry.
Hey, when are you coming back? It's been 8 months, so get your ass back here.
My ex-husband suddenly came to my parents' house and said such things to me with the same irrationality as ever. What is he saying now, after ignoring me for so long? I looked at my husband with cold eyes and said, "We are strangers to each other now."
What are you talking about? We are a married couple. Stop talking nonsense and get your ass back here.
You're the one talking nonsense. You had the divorce papers filled out and in your drawer. You signed them, and I filed them with the state office 8 months ago.
What? You submitted them?
Because you prepared it. You wouldn't leave it there, even signed, unless you were going to divorce me, right?
It was a scare tactic.
A tool of intimidation? I would think you were serious if you had filled out divorce papers after ignoring me for so long and ruining our relationship.
Well, that's because I took my boss's advice to keep ignoring you. He told me that since you were always talking back to me, the only way to get you to obey me was to ignore you thoroughly and wait for you to be obedient. And then he told me about the divorce papers, and that if I finally confronted you with them, you would apologize.
I was so disgusted. He's a lousy boss. And how is his married life going?
His wife and kids left him recently.
Of course, they would. And don't you think you deserve a divorce for doing the same thing? When I said this, my ex-husband looked uncomfortable. However, he seemed to still have a desire not to be outdone by me.
You're the one who's going to have a hard time now that we're separated. Considering your age and the fact that you have a divorce on your marriage record, you'll never remarry. So why don't you get back together with me? How about that? I'll make a special exception for you now. You don't want to be lonely, right? Don't be stubborn. Come back to me.
I decided to tell my ex-husband, whose brain is full of flowers, with a sigh. I'm married to someone else. My ex-husband looked surprised for a moment and then grinned.
Do you really think I would fall for such a blatant lie? You really are a terrible liar.
I'm not lying. Okay, let me show you the proof. I went to the bedroom and woke up my sleeping husband. My husband came to the front door with me in a sleepy state. My ex-husband was standing in the doorway, and his eyes widened when he saw my husband. This is my husband.
Oh, but you are... you are Daisy's ex-husband. It's been a while. How can I help you today? Did you really remarry this man?
That's what I said just right now.
Weren't you just childhood friends who live next door to each other?
He counseled me a lot after you broke up. That brought us closer and we got married. We know so much about each other.
Oh no. What are you doing here? It's early in the morning on a weekend. Oh no, I mean...
Now you know. I'm already starting a new life. If you say anything more or try to stay here, I'll have my husband arrested immediately.
Oh, I don't want that. I'm leaving. I'm not coming here anymore.
Then, get the hell out of here. I yelled, and my ex-husband rushed away from the place. My current husband and childhood friend is a police officer. He and I have been spending our school life together, and we knew each other's personalities very well. And when I got divorced, he went out of his way to come see me and listen to me kindly. He then confided in me that I was his first love, and that he had always had feelings for me. That led to us saying that we should get married because we knew each other so well, even if we just started dating. My husband was loved by my parents, too, and we were living together at my parents' house. That's when my ex-husband came in with no knowledge of what was going on. But still, the reason why my ex-husband kept ignoring me is so stupid that it makes me laugh. I'm really glad I got rid of such a lousy guy. And I heard from a mutual friend that my ex-husband was blamed for a mistake by his boss and was transferred to a rural area in the countryside. But it seems that he had been power harassing his juniors and there was no one to protect him. And the boss also received a pay cut and demotion from the company for causing another problem. But my ex-husband could not come back to the head office. On the other hand, my husband and I are spending happy days together, and I have recently become pregnant. Now we're all looking forward to our child together as a family. It is really terrible to keep ignoring Daisy. I think it is a really bad character of Jake to keep doing it when you know it will hurt his wife. I think your ex-husband should have been sanctioned more harshly. At any rate, I'm glad that Daisy was able to find happiness. I hope she continues to live happily ever after with her dependable husband. Huh? A message floated on the screen as my phone beeped. Hurry up and divorce that monster. I hurriedly opened the message screen and found that all the message had already been cancelled from being sent. It seems that the message sent by my friend was meant to be sent to my husband. That means you were having an affair, right?
Wait, that's a misunderstanding.
Okay, then what is this? When I cornered my husband and showed him something, he started wincing and shaking. My name is Sophia. I'm a 35-year-old office worker. My husband, Chris, and I have been married for 10 years. Our son, Nico, is now 7 years old and goes to elementary school. The happiest time for me is when my son tells me about what happened at school today and we enjoy dinner together as a family. My son has grown up to be a very good boy, and my husband and I have a good relationship. We both work, so my mother takes care of my son during the week, and I balance work with housework and child rearing. Our house is within walking distance of my parents' house, so my son often goes to my parents' house after school to play with my mother. I return home as soon as my work is finished and immediately pick up my son and we go shopping at the supermarket together before returning home to prepare dinner. Then, when my husband comes home, we all sit around the dinner table and enjoy talking and eating together. Every day was like this, but it made me happy. On holidays, we all go out together, and on 3-day weekends, we go on trips. I wanted my son to have as many different experiences as possible, so once a month, we would always take a drive to a place we had never been before. When we take him to the aquarium or our farm, he looks happy with a twinkle in his eye. I thought that I would continue to spend my days with my son and my husband, making many memories in this way. Today was my son's birthday. Since it was a Sunday, my husband and I decided to have a home party. I have a group of 4 close friends from high school, and we invited them, their children, my parents, and my husband's close friends to celebrate with us. My son blew out the candles on the big cake, and everyone applauded. Then, we all ate the food we had prepared. In the evening, my parents went home, we put the children to bed, and the adults went into the evening drinking. My husband got along well with my friends and seemed to enjoy talking with everyone. Seeing my husband like that made me happy. I was happy to see my husband being so open with my good friends. When we had a barbecue in the garden, I invited my friends and my husband's friends to join us, and we enjoyed a big dinner. They were all nice people, and I felt that I was truly living a happy life. After my son's birthday party, the next day was Monday, and I had to go to work. But I had a headache, probably because I was having so much fun and drank so much alcohol. So not having the time to make lunch, I went to a convenience store and picked out some random bread and other items, and took them to the cashier. At that time, I was idly looking at social networking sites to kill time when I suddenly received a series of messages. What? My phone snapped to life and a message appeared on the screen. I looked at the notification and was surprised to see the name Karen. It was so nice to see you yesterday. I guess Sophia didn't notice at all. I can't wait for you to divorce that monster. I got a series of pompous notifications. Yesterday probably means my son's birthday party. Karen was also at yesterday's birthday party. And Sophia was me. She's talking about divorce, so maybe it is. I hurried to open the message screen and found that all the messages had already been cancelled. I knew that the message for my friend was meant for my husband. Did this mean that my husband and Karen were having an affair? I was so confused. But Karen is one of my good friends from high school. I would hate to think that she would have an affair with my husband. But what does she mean by monster? That bothered That bothered me very much. I went home extremely bewildered. A few hours later, my husband came home with an unsuspecting look on his face. He must have received a message from Karen and was responding to it. Was my husband talking bad about me too, just like Karen had called me a monster? I couldn't calm down because I was worried about that. I spent the next few days in a bewildered mood, and then the weekend arrived. I had made a plan. That's something you're not supposed to do, but if this would help me get proof, I thought I would do it. I bought some expensive booze today. It's the weekend. Why don't we have a drink?
That's unusual. What's the matter?
It looked kind of tasty, so I bought some. There's some cured ham, camembert cheese, and some snacks.
Yay! Let's have a drink after dinner as soon as possible.
My husband happily accepted the invitation. Actually, what I bought was expensive, but it also had a high alcohol content. My husband likes to drink, but he gets sleepy easily. So, I decided to wait for him to get drunk by giving him a delicious high alcohol content drink. And my husband was like,
Wow, it's so good.
He drank more and more alcohol as he said it, and as expected, he fell asleep right away. I immediately decided to implement the plan. It was to take my husband's thumb and do the fingerprint authentication of his phone. My husband, who was sleeping and snoring, did not wake up when I held his thumb. I then immediately opened the Messages app. As soon as I brought up the talk screen, Karen was at the top of the list. I opened it up and there were some shocking contents. The week after next, we'll finally celebrate our 5th anniversary of dating. I can't wait to marry you, Chris. If you don't hurry up with a divorce, I'll be in trouble. I understand that you don't want to pay child support, but you don't want to be with that monster anymore, do you? She is calling me a monster again. What in the world is this? Then I read through my husband and Karen's messages and found out why I was called a monster. It was a long time ago when I was pregnant. Our current house was built when our son was 2 years old, and before that, my husband and I lived in a small apartment. My husband came home after drinking and suddenly started to smoke. At the time, I was in a bad physical condition due to severe morning sickness, and I was in a temper. I was extremely angry at my husband, who had no consideration for his pregnant wife for coming home after drinking alcohol and lighting up a cigarette. And I was in the shape of an ogre. If you want to smoke, go out on the balcony, I told my husband. He said that my face at that time looked like a monster and scared him so much. Karen and Chris seemed to be using that as a story and calling me a monster. I was appalled at the two of them for having an affair for that long on top of all that nonsense. And I vowed to get revenge on both of them. I immediately took pictures of my husband's and Karen's messages with my own phone. They were also planning a trip to celebrate their 5th anniversary. My husband said he had a business trip that day. In other words, they had been planning it for some time. I immediately began preparing for the divorce. I consulted a lawyer first, and he said that those messages alone are enough proof of adultery. If I could get a divorce for my husband's fault, there would be no problem. When I found out that he was having an affair, I lost all affection for Chris at once. About 2 weeks later, my husband was leaving the house early in the morning with his carry-on case. Oh my, are you leaving already?
Well, the company took the fastest flight out. I have to take the first train to catch the flight.
Oh, is it because it's the cheapest one? You must have skimped on the airfare.
That's the way it is with companies.
I almost blew up. How could you lie so brazenly, assuming I didn't know about it?
I'm off then.
My husband says so, and I stopped him.
What? I told you I have to hurry.
You're lying about the business trip. My husband was upset because I suddenly said that.
What are you talking about? I told you in advance that it was a business trip.
It was a pre-arranged trip, wasn't it? You are meeting Karen. The mention of the name Karen upset my husband even more.
Wait a minute, a trip? Karen? I don't see what you're talking about at all. I'm just going on a business trip by myself.
You're just going to bluff your way through this, but Karen confessed. She said she was going on a trip with you with no strings attached. That means you've been having an affair, right? Karen already explained it to me.
Wait, that's a misunderstanding.
My husband defended himself, looking pale.
I'm just doing Karen a favor. I don't have anything to do with her.
Oh, really? What was the favor?
Well, she asked me to go with her to check out a luxury hotel she was thinking of booking as a birthday gift for her boyfriend, to see if it was a good one.
I almost blew up again. How dare he come up with such a lie trying to deceive me? Did he think I was a very pure girl or something? So you're saying you're not having an affair?
Yes, of course. In fact, we have separate rooms.
Then why doesn't he just let Karen go down there by herself? What he is saying is too messed up. So what's this about? I cornered him and showed him something, and he started shaking.
That's messages between me and Karen.
It says here that you've been together 5 years and you want to divorce a monster like me as soon as possible, right? My husband was frozen with his mouth agape. Then the time for the first train was already past, and Chris received an incoming call on his phone. I quickly snatched the phone from my husband and answered the call. I pressed the call button and heard Karen's voice. Hey Chris, did you get on the train? Hello Karen. Why are you so surprised? What? Sophia? But why? Because I found out that Chris lied about his business trip and was having an affair. Oh no. Oh, by the way, you must be in a hurry. It's a luxury hotel, right? It would be a shame to cancel. So you and Chris can go on your 5th anniversary trip. Of course, when you come back, I'll charge you with alimony. I'll also have to send a content certified letter to Chris and Karen's workplaces. And of course, I'll have to report back to their parents' homes. I also have to report it to our good friends group and Chris's friends. Wait a minute. If you do that, we'll be socially finished. Well, that's what you deserve, I guess. I'm going to be busy. And since Chris is such a nuisance at home, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave the house. Why don't you go enjoy your last luxury trip before you get into debt? Karen fell silent when I said that. I handed the phone back to my husband. Anyway, you're in my way, so get the hell out of my house. And chased my husband out of the house.
No, wait, Sophia, please.
My husband said this to me in a pale, disappearing voice, but I ignored him, locked the house, and got into the shower. When I got out of the shower and finished getting ready, my husband was already gone. I then went to work and went to a lawyer after work. Then I really did what I had just said to Karen and her husband. I don't know if those two went actually on that trip, but when they came back, it was sure to be a big fight. Then 2 days passed and Chris and Karen came home together. Wait a minute, you can't really be doing all of this. I've been getting calls from my company asking me what's going on, messages of cutting ties with me from my close group of friends, and my parents have told me they're disowning me. How can you take responsibility for this? Karen screams emotionally, her face turning red. My husband is angry too.
I didn't think you will go that far, bitch. You're acting like you're the victim here, but you have a fault too. But you try to put us all in a social predicament. You're such a monster. You know that?
When my husband said that much, my father came out of the living room.
Hey, how much more do you need to insult my daughter? William.
My husband was startled by my father's appearance.
No, this was... Well, I got emotional and said something I hadn't expected to say. I don't want to hear any excuses. You two, come here.
My father said with a frightened look on his face. My husband and Karen are frozen, their faces scrunched up.
I told you to come here.
My father said twice, and the two of them rushed into the house in a frightened panic. When they entered the living room, they were absolutely stunned. My parents, my husband's parents, a group of friends who were close to me and Karen, and a group of friends who were close to my husband were all in the living room. Why are they all here? I invited them. You guys were going to attack me anyway, so I called them. Everyone gave them cold stares. Karen, you're disgusting. I heard your conversation earlier, and I didn't think you were such a bad judge of a character. Well... A good friend of mine and Karen accuses Karen.
Chris, you're not a manly man. How can you call a woman you married a monster? It's just...
And my father-in-law stood in front of my husband and slapped him.
You should never come back to your parents' house again. You're a disgrace to the family. Apologize to Sophia right away.
My husband apologized to me, holding his cheek as my father-in-law hit him.
Sophia, I am so sorry for saying terrible things and hurting you.
Karen, you should apologize too, my friend exclaimed, and Karen came to me saying she was truly sorry too. Of course, you two need to apologize, but don't expect me to forgive you for that. With that, I called my lawyer who was waiting for me in the next room. This is my lawyer. Let's talk about the alimony right away. When I said this, they both turned pale. The lawyer proceeded with the conversation without worrying about their reactions. The two of you have admitted to having an affair, and you have been having an affair for 5 years. Therefore, Sophia can claim $60,000 in alimony for each of you.
$60,000?
We can't pay that much money. When the two of them shouted that, the people around them attacked them all at once.
You can pay it in installments.
You had an affair, you should be punished that much. With no one on their side, Chris and Karen fell silent. The lawyer then proceeded to explain the situation to them in an indifferent manner and handed them the documents. If you fail to pay, we will seize your wages immediately. My husband and Karen no longer looked sane. My husband and I successfully obtained a divorce. I demanded alimony of $60,000 each from my husband and Karen, and I also demanded child support. My husband seemed to have thought that he could pay me by selling the house, but of course, I demanded a share of the property. I demanded that he pay me half of the house's appraised value if the house was to be in his name. My husband didn't think he had to give me so much property. He sold the house for $500,000, but $250,000 was mine. Furthermore, the mortgage still had $150,000 left, so my husband only had $100,000 left. And $60,000 would disappear with the alimony for the affair. So, he would have $40,000 left, from which he would have to pay child support every month. Moreover, my husband has lost the trust of people at his company because of this incident, so it has become difficult for him to get promoted. So, he had to continue paying child support on a low salary, living a poor life. Since Karen works for an all-female company and her affair was discovered, her colleagues and even her bosses look at her coldly, and she feels small every day. Furthermore, since they have been disowned by their parents, they cannot ask for help in paying the alimony, and most of their salaries have disappeared to pay the bills. They have also both lost a lot of friends and are feeling lonely. It's a really good feeling. On the other hand, although I was extremely shocked and saddened, I was also glad that I was able to secure my son's tuition and other expenses because I got a lot of money all at once. After that, I went back to my parents' house with my son. My son seemed rather happy to live with his grandparents, whom he loves. From now on, I will live strong as a single mother and raise my son. He is such a lousy man for having an affair with his wife's friend for 5 years. I wish he could be more socially sanctioned. But whatever the case, I'm glad that Sophia got what she could get and was able to cut ties with Chris. I know it will be tough as a single mother from now on, but I hope you and your son get along and live happily ever after.